Thanks everyone for joining, for coming today. We really appreciate the turnout here in the room and glad to have everyone online. My name is Marshall Brown. I work with the carbon pricing global practice here at the Global Green Growth Institute. I'm really happy to start kick off the session today on building capacities and leveling the playing field in Article 6. I would like to go ahead and welcome our opening remarks from Dr. Frank Reisberman, who is the Director General of GGGI. Please.
Thank you, Marshall. And yes, this is a session from a number of people who are deep experts in Article 6 already, Marshall said. Carbon credits, really, right? For people who don't quite know what Article 6 is, I think we have to recognize there will be a lot of people online who are interested. Actually, Mona predicted that this might be the session with the highest number of people participating because a lot of people are interested, but also a lot of people don't quite know what it is, what it means, or what even leveling the playing field is, right? And I would say for those of you who are not in CPU or Article 6 experts, and when you say carbon credits or offsets, what do you think of? Well, I don't know what you think of, but if you've just read the newspapers the last year or so, there has been a ton of very negative publicity around carbon credits, right? So why are we even engaged in this? It's not a rhetorical question. When we first proposed that we would start a carbon pricing unit, we got GGI staff saying, we shouldn't be involved in this. This is not serious. This is a reputational risk, right? I think we entered into it because we believe that there is actually a real opportunity to do really good stuff that shouldn't be a reputational risk. But on the other hand, it is clear that particularly around the voluntary carbon market and particularly around these millions of tons of carbon credits that have been sold to somehow solve the climate crisis by planting trees. There have been a lot of projects that have been questioned by The Guardian and other very solid newspapers. So we should at least be aware of that, and we should be able to explain why we believe that what we are doing is not a reputational risk and is actually really in the interest of our both buying and selling members of GGI. And to me, the simplest example is still that when we have a country like Korea, where they have made the commitment to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030, the same that the whole world should be doing. And in the global stocktake, we see that it's way not happening. And a country like Korea will be struggling. Frankly, when the parliament adopted its climate act, they said the maximum they could do was 32% by 2030. The president still felt he had to commit 40%. And we know that that difference would only be achievable in the mind of most Korean policymakers if they're able to have international transactions. So that's one perspective of selling countries. And yes, I think carbon prices, it is quite realistic that the cost of additional reductions of emissions in Korea would soon be $100 a ton, even higher. And a lot of experts have said, if we don't get to carbon markets that are operating such prices, we're not going to get to 1.5 degrees. On the other hand, in countries like Sri Lanka or Nepal or Cambodia, where the domestic requirements to reduce emissions are much lower, it's quite realistic that there could be costs of an additional reduction that are more along the lines of $10 a ton. So if a country like that could make an agreement with Korea to buy ITMOs at $50 a ton, hey, I don't have to negotiate these prices, so I can say these numbers without any of the reservations that the people who do negotiate them really have. But then it's obvious that there should be a possibility for mutual benefit, right? Korea should be able to buy ITMOs at prices that are much lower than what it costs in Korea. And countries that's where the real cost of reduction is $10 a ton, if they can sell those at 50, they can do the real reduction, not paper reduction, real reduction, and still have $40 to increase resilience or use those resources to have climate action beyond those initial reductions. So I think we need to have some real belief that those kind of transactions, who are really in the mutual interest of buyers and sellers, are possible in the relatively near term. But it's also clear that if you take a country like Indonesia, that has a pretty high requirement for its own NDC, decisions of what they can actually sell and at what prices are not at all easy or not at all obvious. So they do need, well, what do they need? They need a solid MRV so that they can demonstrate that reductions are really achieved, and they need a pretty sophisticated capacity to make decisions of what it is that they can actually sell at prices that make sense for them as sellers and as buyers. If you take countries like Sweden here at the table, or Korea or others. So this is a complex situation, but yeah, we have entered it, and I think we have built a team that by now has worked with a dozen or so countries to build capacity, to help build better MRVs, to build that capacity, to make smart decisions, to put all the sort of framework in place. And we're getting pretty close to saying, wow, by COP, maybe there are countries that are going to sign agreements that sort of are the precursor to making deals. And we've read the first few deals, you know, where Thailand sold ITMOs because they bought a whole bunch of electric buses and were able to gain some revenue from those ITMOs. Those are relatively simple cases. Eventually, personally, I'm hoping that we will be able to support countries like Sri Lanka that might really rehabilitate their mangroves, or even other blue economy based carbon credits. Those are obviously not the easiest ones, right? Those are the more complicated deals. So they require a lot more methodology, they require more study. But that, I would hope, is the path we're on. That in the near term, we can support both members that want to sell and members or other countries like Sweden that are not yet members, but might consider that, to make deals that are in mutual interest that help accelerate climate action. That really is the only reason that we're in this business. And yes, then we know wonderful examples from countries like Ethiopia, where we had a GIS project to help Ethiopia have greener industrial parks. And in the first analysis we did, it wasn't quite commercial enough to attract green investments. In the second analysis that Vamsi did for a potential project between Ethiopia and Sweden at the time, those carbon credits would really make a difference to lift projects into an area where they became commercially attractive. And Vamsi was mostly busy in coming up with a business model that included a distribution of benefits over all the stakeholders, that motivated all the stakeholders, provided incentives for all the stakeholders to do such projects. So for GDGI and for many of our member countries, it's not just carbon credits and CPUs separately. There's a direct link to a lot of the other work we do, to other large-scale either infrastructure or hopefully in the future nature-based solutions type investments, where carbon credits could make a real difference in making projects feasible or accelerating climate action. So that's my vision, maybe dream, but hopefully the people in this panel will show you that actually we are beavering away step by step in making these kind of dreams a reality. That's certainly why I think all the people that you'll hear are engaged in this area. And we believe there are a lot of other people in our other member countries that may not have all the knowledge yet to decide whether this is something for them, but they're interested. That's of course why we're in sessions like this, We hope to be able to share your insights and experience to date so that we can make this a viable solution for many more of our member countries and other partners. So that's the expectation. No pressure. Actually, it's difficult, we know that. But we do believe that this is an area where this showcases very nicely how organizations like our own can play a positive role in advancing areas that would really accelerate green growth and climate action. So thank you for being here. That was my little words at the beginning and opening, sharing both for our GGI colleagues and members why we're doing this and what our aspirations are that we hope to see come to fruition. I'll leave it to Fenella to see if she wants to say our targets and by when we can do this with our partners. So I will not spoil that for her, but we have high expectations for considerable success. Thank you. And over to you.
All right. Thank you, Frank, for those welcoming remarks. I just want to go a little bit over the session format for today. So we have a two-part session. During this first hour, we will focus on the topic of governance frameworks. So Article 6 strategies and institutional frameworks. We'll start this first hour with a discussion, with a presentation from expert Benjamin Harris from Carbon Limits. And then after his presentation, we will have a panel discussion with our friends from Sri Lanka, Sweden, and Zambia, if we can address some technical issues, maybe, maybe not, moderated by our unit lead, Fenella. So let me turn the mic over right now to Benjamin, who should be online, I believe.
Hi, everyone. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see you, Benjamin.
All right, awesome. Hi, really good to see you all. Good morning from Oslo, Norway, and good afternoon to all of you. Really good to see some familiar faces in Seoul. It would have been great to be there with you, but looking forward to have the opportunity in other forums. But thank you so much for having me. And I think I'll take just a few minutes to sort of set the stage, I think, to the knowledge exchange session, which I think is gonna create a better understanding of what we're trying to convey here. And I think it's also taking some of the words from Frank on trying to provide some clarity to all of these gray zones, gray areas, terms that we don't really understand how to define them, and things that we are trying to figure out and support countries on how they can put this in a more organized and sort of regulatory perspective document that can help on implementing Article 6 activities in our countries. So thank you again for the space, and real pleasure to be sharing with you this session. So I'll be covering basically these three main topics. I'll try, I cannot really guarantee anything, but I'll try to convey what is an Article 6 governance framework. Also, I would like to share some of the early lessons, and I call it early lessons because this is a fairly new topic. This is something that very few countries around the globe has developed their own governance framework around Article 6. So I think it will be good to share some of the things that we have seen so far that might be helpful for other countries that are starting to figure out how they can do it, how they can implement their governance frameworks. And finally, to tell you a bit about the work that we're doing currently together with the Global Green Growth Institute and a few other consortium members on a project called Supporting Preparedness for Article 6 Cooperation, or SPARC, where we are supporting countries on this roadmap towards Article 6 implementation. I'll give you more details. So without further ado, I would like to begin by trying to convey a few ideas. First, how can we actually define an Article 6 framework? And this is something that we can see it from a very high level perspective on what are the main things that we need to keep in mind when we're talking about having our own governance framework as part of our efforts on Article 6 implementation. First, we need to think that a host country's governance framework can be defined as a country's own approach to Article 6 participation. The Article 6 governance framework is deliberatively a high-level document, and it provides flexibility to countries regarding their engagement with a still evolving international capital markets. So it should not be something completely strict and defined. It rather should provide flexibility to countries to adapt to all these evolving things that are occurring and the new decisions that are coming every single year as part of the COP negotiations. It should also reflect these unique national circumstances. Therefore, there's no single design approach that exists around the globe. And this is something that I would like to develop a bit further. Host countries, though, and this is perhaps the only rule that I would like to highlight, they need to decide among various options when designing an Article 6 governance frameworks. And on those options, they should be able to manage as much as they can their opportunities and risks. So as I mentioned before, there's no clear definition or standardization on what an Article 6 governance framework is. We see that some host parties or countries are defining them as a framework, or they're publishing what they call frameworks. Some other countries are calling them guidelines, some other countries operations manual, some other countries policy. But in reality, these documents that are being published and drafted cannot be really compared because they have different scopes and even different titles, as I just mentioned. So one of the things that I would like to do today is to quickly go and explore some of the things that makes an Article 6 framework important. Let's begin by that, okay? So why do we need to have a governance framework when we're talking about Article 6? Well, first and foremost, and perhaps the most obvious statement, is that we need to meet the Article 6 reporting obligations, right? But then we can also take advantage of this governance framework to promote activity development, financing, and systems, to ensure our own country's NDC compliance and policy coordination, to support the coordination with other carbon pricing instruments, and to comply with social and environmental safeguards. But what are the main components? Like when we're really talking about the segments of what a governance framework could have, let's go into the next slide where I would like to put everything in a more concrete manner. The way we perceive an Article 6 governance framework is by these three different pillars. First, we talk about an Article 6 strategy. Second, about an Article 6 institutional framework. And lastly, basically putting everything in place by laws, regulation, or policies. Article 6 strategy, should be focusing on the priorities, identifying those priorities and those areas that governments would like to highlight and would like to address as part of their Article 6 strategy. And later on, based on that, countries can start to develop their authorization criteria and conditions. Most of these authorization criteria and conditions are to support countries on reducing as much as they can the risks, namely overselling risks. Then we have the institutional framework. So in the institutional framework, we need to start defining and understanding what are the main tasks and processes that needs to be in place. Who will be responsible for what? And do we actually need to create new departments within our ministries, or do we need to develop new governing bodies? And lastly, as I mentioned before, we need to put everything written down and create the document that will make this operational. This can be a part of a law, a regulation, or policy, and it doesn't necessarily has to be a fairly or completely new document. It can be an amendment of existing ones. And this is something that connects as well very well with some of the early lessons that we have identified as part of our work on Article 6. And as I mentioned, I call them early lessons because when we were teaming back and trying to define what are those lessons learned, well, in reality, it's such a new approach and such a new topic that very few countries have actually published and publicized their own governance framework. Some of these countries are actually now joining us today for the knowledge exchange, so it'd be great to also hear from them if they agree with this or if they will add anything else. But in a nutshell, I will call this early lessons as first, the host bodies should define its framework based on their conditions, existing capabilities, and resources. We need to be realistic. We're not trying to develop a state-of-the-art regulation that will not allow us to comply with it and to implement it because we don't have the people, we don't have the resources, we don't have the knowledge in order to make it happen. We need to adapt and we need to be realistic into what is it that we're putting in the table. All relevant stakeholders should be involved in the development of the Article 6 governance framework. Most importantly, the private sector and the potential activity proponents. So they are very well aware of what are the discussions, so what type of rules and conditions will be part of this governance framework. And they can also be involved in those discussions and provide their own feedback and their own point of view. This will allow as well to get the private sector buy-in and will ease our way into the actual implementation of an Article 6 activity in the future. As I mentioned before, there's no need to reinvent the wheel. The Article 6 governance framework can be based on existing capacity and resources. As I said, we can amend existing documents. We can utilize the same governing bodies, but we need to create this additional capacity and additional mandates that will make Article 6 governance operational. Most importantly, we need to create capacity both internally and externally. Internally, because we're creating new tasks, we are providing new mandates, and people internally within our governments will need to understand better what are we talking about when we're saying or when we're talking about Article 6 governance framework. What will be the authorization pathways? What type of processes will be in place? And externally as well, because we cannot design everything internally and then at the end of the day it's like, okay guys, here is the plan, implement it. And then just as Frank said, but what is Article 6 to start with? So let's create capacity also externally so we can implement Article 6 by all means the easiest and quickest way as possible, so we don't have to cope with any type of boundaries in terms of knowledge, both internal and external. And finally, importance of transparency on information and criteria. I cannot say more on this in terms of how important it is to actually having all of these processes, consultation, publications to be as transparent as public as possible. So as well, we can get some of the trust from the private sector and the society in general on why, understanding better why the country decided to be part of Article 6 and what are the benefits that will come with it. So importance of transparency on information and criteria. And lastly, to not take any more time of this session and sort of go into the more meaty parts about the discussions of the things that the country representatives have to share with us, I would like to give you a sneak peek of the work that we are doing together with the Global Green Growth Institute, with UNEP, Copenhagen Climate Center, GFA Consulting, and Communal Credit Public Consulting, KPC. These provided of funds provided by the German government. This is a project that has many levels of knowledge creation, knowledge exchange, capacity building, and so on. But at the core of it, there is what we call the toolbox. And as part of this toolbox, we're developing the initial deliverables, which are 6 guides. These 6 guides are meant for activity proponents, meaning the private sector, for governments, for a mix of both, or for basically everyone. In the case of the first guide, that we call it Increasing Innovation and Promoting Transformational Change, here we're talking about addressing both government and private actors. So we make sure that they understand the importance of increasing lasting impact. But then we start to address the issues in regards to Article 6 implementation from the government perspective. And this is where guides 2, 3, and 4 take place. The guides 2 and guides 3 in particular will be basically targeting the issue of governance framework first by talking about how to develop an Article 6 host body strategy on prioritizing opportunities and managing risks, and then on deciding the institutional roles and procedures that will come on Guide 3. Another aspect that will be addressed as well for governments is on understanding how they can interact and create proper relationships between Article 6 and existing carbon pricing instruments, such as an emissions trading system, a carbon tax, and some others. And the last part of the toolbox, at least in this initial phase, is addressed or is targeted towards the private sector and activity developers. First, by giving them a roadmap on how to navigate activity cycle and requirements on Guide 5 on developing Article 6 strategy, developing Article 6 activities. And on Guide 6, where we try to engage the private sector buyers and finance providers by giving them a good understanding of the financial and contractual models for Article 6. So with that, I will thank you for your attention, and I really look forward for the knowledge exchange section. So thank you so much, and I'll be present for the rest of the session in case you have any questions.
Thanks so much for that. Really helpful. I think that gives us a really good flavor to start things off. So, as we try to do always in GGGI, we will now be engaging with a discussion with what the situation really is on the ground in countries. So I have extremely valuable and rich panel to be able to discuss this point. And I think we have managed to successfully actually get the Zambian representative online. Great. So online, so for those who aren't familiar with me, my name is Fenella Awan, and I head carbon pricing here at GGGI. Online, joining on the panel is Dr. Duty Chibamba, who's the Permanent Secretary within the Ministry of Green Economy and Environment from Zambia. Hello, Dr. Chibamba. Nice to have you online. Oh, further away, thank you. Also in
Good morning,
the room,
everybody.
Good morning. Also in the room, we are joined by Dr. Anil Jasinga, the Secretary of the Ministry of Environment from Sri Lanka. Welcome, Dr. Jasinga. And also delighted to be joined by Ms. Sandra Lindström, who is the Head of International Climate Cooperation from the Swedish Energy Agency, which is the agency tasked by the government and Kingdom of Sweden to purchase and deal with all carbon-related items. Welcome, Sandra. Thank you. Okay, so we've structured this panel in such a way that we asked everybody the same question, and I'm going to turn to each of the panel members and ask them to respond in turn to the same question, and then we have some further questions. And I will always encourage any of my panel members to ask each other questions as well, because I do feel that that will certainly aid the knowledge sharing. And as we have potential buyers and sellers represented on the panel, I think that will certainly add to the information for the audience. So first of all, I'm going to start with the main question, which is some countries are adopting a wait and see approach to Article 6 implementation. So wait until all the international rules and operational steps are finalized. But many others are taking a slightly different, more proactive approach, where they are constructing and developing their own arrangements for Article 6, knowing that these will need to be adapted over time as the details of the rule book and market norms come into place. So what I would really like to understand from each of the panel members is, what is the approach that your country is taking and why? So I'm going to start with Dr. Chibamba online, please. I think we have a frozen. We have stuck. Oh, okay. While Dr. Shabamba reconnects, I will turn instead to Dr. Jasinga.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Of course, I'm not an expert on learning curve, but for this question, basically, now when I asked my additional secretary in charge of this, area, he used to tell me that, this is still under negotiation, and it's not forthcoming, and maybe next COP. So, but I know that to some extent, there are results, right? So, so my opinion was, why not we work on what we have on the ground. So, so therefore, actually, I can say that we accelerated Article 6 actions, but of course, we started somewhat late. So basically, if you wait till everything is done, then you may be too late, because if you chip in earlier, then it will be easy for you to catch up and, sort of mainstream. So, but of course, there's a new this thing, and as it was, transpired earlier by the presenter, it has to be known by across the board. And that is one weak area, because we may know to some extent, but the other stakeholders may not know anything, right? So therefore that's very important. And of course, we have our problems. We have, for example, we don't have a law on Article 6, and then we don't have a framework. So what really we started off is, actually, we are in the making of Climate Change Act. We will be incorporating this into Climate Change Act, but it will take time. So once again, for us to wait till we incorporate into our act, again, we push it, forward. So therefore, we started off by appointing an expert team. So that expert team work on the readiness, the capacity building, and working on the framework. So of course, even without this, it doesn't say that we were not in carbon trading. Of course, voluntary carbon market has been in operation in Sri Lanka, and but then we don't know the quantities, and we don't know where these credits end up in. And so therefore we need institutional framework. And also Sri Lanka signed up with Japan, JCM, and the recently the joint committee, of course, gave the green light for the first project. It's 50-50 investments. So, and then also we signed MOU with Singapore, and next we'll have to sign with them on the agreement, but then we wait for their readiness support as well. So which we wanted to have it beforehand, but they wanted to sign the MOU. But then now we say, okay, let's go. I'm sure Fonella, the GGGI, is also waiting to support us on using this readiness from Singapore. And then, of course, South Korea. We are waiting to sign with South Korea. So therefore, I mean, this the compliance market, the bilateral agreements we have signed, and we are moving ahead. But then we need across the board framework for things to be put in, line. So therefore, I think I'm sure GGGI will support us very much. And even yesterday with DGI had a good discussion. So I think for time being, that should be enough. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jasinga. And yes, of course, we are very much looking forward. And I hope at the end of the whole session this evening, I might be able to tell you a little bit more about the carbon transaction facility that we hope will be able to assist with work on readiness in countries such as Sri Lanka. Okay, I think, yes, I can see a blink. So I think we have Dr. Chibamba. So may I now pass to you, because I'm desperately excited for you to be able to share some of the news. I saw the great dancing display from last week in Lusaka. So I think we're all interested to hear, why was there dancing in Lusaka? So Dr. Chibamba.
Thank you so much. Apologies, I was off briefly due to technical issues, but good to see all of you out there. So back in Lusaka, we basically have a similar story with Sri Lanka. We do not have a law at the moment on carbon trading. However, we are working on the acts for carbon trading, and hopefully it should be out the first quarter of 2024. And however, we have not taken a wait and see approach to Article 6. We knew that Article 6 was in the oven being baked, and it would take a bit of time. So we went ahead and took chances with voluntary carbon projects. We do have a number of players that we've authorized to trade in carbon. The main sticking point has been the benefit sharing mechanism. A lot of local communities have complained that the process is not transparent. So what we've done, we are doing a pilot project in one of our provinces where we have taken a jurisdictional approach. So currently we do have a draft benefit sharing mechanism that was agreed upon by the local communities together with investors. And basically it's 15% to the government and project implementation unit, 30% to the investor, and 55% to the local communities. It's still being debated, but at least we have some framework that we can work with. We do not have a carbon trading framework, but back in December 2022, we did issue what we called interim guidelines for carbon trading. So we've received support from the Spark 6 project. So working with this project, we've gone back to those interim guidelines to try and enhance them. And indeed, last week, we are launching the enhanced version of these guidelines, and that is what the dancing was all about. So basically, what we're trying to enhance in the enhanced guidelines is the issue of the criteria with regards to environmental integrity, sustainable development, and ambition raising. The other aspect that we're enhancing is around detailing information on financial additionality and contribution to the achievement of sustainable development goals. The other one is to provide a comprehensive set of robust and transparent indicators against which the projects have to perform and be evaluated. And then the other one is the covering entire project development process from application to approval, as well as provide the templates for concept notes and mitigation activity development documents. So those are some of the enhancements that we are making. But remember, this is only phase one of this process. We still have other things pending, like the MRV and the registry, which is very crucial in as far as monitoring and taking stock of what is happening, whether we're doing the right thing is concerned. We are hopeful that maybe the MRV, because we have already started the process of developing the MRV system, and we are hoping that maybe by the end of this year, we'll be somewhere where we could say, okay, the system is in place. So really, basically, this is where we are, but I'm really happy and interested to hear that Sri Lanka is talking to Japan, Singapore, and South Korea to see if they can do some bilateral agreements. We are also willing to jump in the fray and explore those opportunities and see what we can get out of them. I think for now, that's the good news from Lusaka. Thanks.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Dr. Chibamba. I think the idea of this is the first phase. There's more to come, the MRV and the registries. And I agree, essentially important to ensure that there is robust, high integrity and transparent transactions happening. However, I'm encouraged very much to see that, first of all, tell the private sector what they can go away and have a think about and start developing. And we all know it's going to take a few years before there's a project on the ground that needs monitoring. So I think it's the right way to go about it and the right phase to bring in first. And I think as well in the negotiations, the centralized registry that is meant to be coming in under Article 6.4 will be very valuable and could, we don't know yet, but could actually save countries a lot of time, effort, and capacity. So we want to see how we can coordinate with that as well. But the Spark program consortia are there supporting you and will continue to do so for the next 3 years. So thank you very much for that. Let me turn now. So there's a bit of a flavor of the sell side and how two countries are both, in fact, taking a look. We've got to actually get on with something. We can't wait until everything is in place. So let us now turn to our third panelist, who has a very different side and a different view from the buy side. So if I can pass to Ms. Lindstrom. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernanda. And thank you so much for inviting me to speak at this panel. Very pleased. First of all, before I answer to the question, I thought I'll take this opportunity to just say a few words about why Sweden is engaged in Article 6 and the motivations for our engagement. So Sweden has a net zero goal by 2045, and the plan is to reduce the emissions as much as possible in Sweden. But if we can't go all the way to zero, there's a flexibility for us to use supplementary measures, and one of the supplementary measures is Article 6. So that's one of the reasons why we engage, but also we believe that this is an instrument that can push the climate ambition because it allows us all to finance mitigation actions that won't be that would have not happened otherwise. And also we believe that this is an opportunity to push investments that would not have happened to the global south, which I think is very important. So Sweden started in 2018, so that's 5 years from now, and it has been difficult. At that time, there were not very many countries engaged. The rules were very the Paris Agreement was very new, and we didn't have the rules in place. But the reason why we did that is because we believe that there is benefits of being early in the market. We believe that we can shape and influence the development of the mechanism, and also with regards to the reasons that I mentioned before, that this is an opportunity for the climate community to push investments and so on. And so to your question, Fenella, on the approach that we're taking. So we have been early, and we have memorandum of understanding that we have signed. It's with Nepal Dominican Republic and Ghana, and we hope that we will be able to have more partner countries in the nearest future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandra. I think it's nice to hear it's not just the sellers who are saying it's really difficult. It's not easy to set this up. And I think those of you who feel that as sellers, it's an awful lot of work and it's very new, take heart that it's tough for the buyers as well. There's an awful lot of new regulation that needs to be done for them too. I'd like to actually maybe focus on that a little bit more, because what help is needed and exactly where is it needed to help you move on quicker, faster, scale up? So if I can turn to each of you again and ask briefly, what are some of the greatest challenges you faced in setting up or starting on this road of governance frameworks? So I'm thinking things like the staff skills, understanding or knowledge around Article 6, the workload, the resources, the technical infrastructure to even do MRV. What has been some of the most difficult things that you've had? So maybe if I can switch it around a bit and start perhaps with you, Sandra, and sort of see where's been your biggest challenge?
Well, thank you for the question, Fenella. So with regards to the framework, so we have partly the framework in place. So we don't have the full framework yet. What we have in place so far is that we have a clear mandate for the Swedish Energy Agency to engage with countries to develop Article 6 programs, and also to engage with actors, both public and private sector, to finance Article 6 programs that would be compliant to Article 6. What we don't have in place yet is the framework for how the authorization and the transfer, how that process looks like, who will be responsible for those processes. And I think I heard Benjamin before here mention that let's not invent the wheel again. So what we are doing in Sweden is we are looking into how do we do it when we were engaged in in the Kyoto Protocol's clean development mechanism. So what we have done is we have looked into that and see what did work, and what didn't work, and we try to learn from those lessons. And now we're trying to see how we can organize that. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Sandra. I think, Dr. Jasinga, it's the first time we meet in person, but we have had a few virtual calls. And there I remember you saying, we want to get on with this, but we're not sure what we're doing at the moment. You have an expert team, as you say, but clearly they're having to cover so many things and are very stretched. Where are you finding the particular pinch points at the moment that are sort of holding you back from getting out of the starting gates?
Well, as you said, we have certain experts, and they know stuff to a certain extent. But since this is new still globally, I think we need the assistance in terms of capacity building, technology, and financing. But on the other hand, we are very much eager, because we don't simply consider this as mitigatory effort. Because if you take Sri Lanka, or for that matter Zambia, we are in the tropical belt, and I think for the green transition the Article 6 may be useful among other things, because, of course, our emissions are just negligible, 0.03%. But then we don't think that way. So therefore, we need to somehow, get on to this. And the thing is, now that Article 6.4 is still, long way to go. I think I can see if with all these experts, COP finds it difficult to come to certain conclusions. So you can think about a country like Sri Lanka or Zambia for that matter. So I think what I see is now we are going ahead with our the framework, but certainly in that framework there will be a lot of gaps, I can expect. So that is, I think that is where you the GGGI or any other organization must chip in and work with us, and also updates of, it's getting updated. These articles are getting updated, and also if we really don't get this right, we can be victims sometimes. The transparency is an issue. So there are a lot of external, the pressure, and even internally you can, come under pressure. So therefore, I think getting the framework right is very important, and that is where we need the real support, But of course, we can work with our experts. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jasinga. And I think that brings up a couple of really interesting areas. First of all, it's not that you need a one-size-fits-all package of technical assistance. It's no, we can do this bit by ourselves. We have our own experts. We know and we're confident in this area, but I need someone to fill in that gap or just help us on that bit. We're not sure how to do that section. And secondly, the benefit sharing. And I think, Dr. Chijwamba, you've already mentioned this once with regard to, I think it's in relation to the FCPF and the, I'm sorry, I shouldn't use these terrible acronyms when half the people on the line won't have a clue what I'm talking about, but the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility by the World Bank, which is a results-based payment measured in terms of volume of carbon. And I know that there has been some recent press, but everybody is keen to do it. But how do you set the rules in place for benefit sharing, and how do you know what's the right level? So I think maybe with that in mind, if I can turn to you and say, where have you found the most challenges and the most issues with setting up how to trade in all carbon markets, not just under Article 6? Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. So we seem to have similar challenges because, first of all, climate change is a very knowledge-intensive arena. Now, when we even come to carbon is abstract. No one can see it. So we do have challenges around skills. And by skills here, we talk, maybe having one or two real carbon experts around whom other experts can come and converge and see how they support one another. So we need capacity building in terms of soft skills. Our focal point organization for all things carbon is the Zambia Environmental Management Agency. So there again, we do not really have adequate skill set that can move this process forward. But our biggest challenge is the infrastructure, the infrastructure to house this registry, both hardware and software. At the moment, I would say that is our biggest challenge, because if we have to have a working registry, then we need those servers, we need those computers, we need that regular update of the software, like my colleague from Sri Lanka has mentioned. So at the moment, the biggest bind that we're finding ourselves in is the infrastructure. How do we put up that infrastructure? And of course, that goes with financial resources. This issue of developing a registry has been on the cards for some years, but we've not made real progress. So it will be around infrastructure and skills. And of course, we are grateful Spark 6 is doing quite a lot in terms of trying to help to up our skills around this subject matter. So today, for me, what I see as the biggest problem is the infrastructure, the servers that we need to create this registry. And this is why we are hoping this pilot we are doing in Eastern Province under the World Bank. You know, if you're talking of a central registry, this is basically what we are trying to do under the jurisdictional approach. We are saying, who are the players in this province? So we take account of all the players, we bring them together, each one of them contribute their credits, and then those credits are sold as a block. And then each investor gets their share based on how much they contribute. So for us, it's basically infrastructure, financial resources, and skill set development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chibamba. And I think extremely valid point, the infrastructure, the hardware, software that you speak about. I can talk about a very old story from the Clean Development Mechanism where I was working for a commercial bank and we actually had to buy the Department of Climate Change in one country a printer so that they could actually print out the host country letter of approval for us. So there is a real need for either electronic versions or something to make it easy, or the infrastructure provided. And I think it becomes more complicated as we go on. I do desperately want to ask questions from the room, but I'm getting a very severe look from the corner saying your time is up. But I think that was Frank laying out what needs to be my next year's business plan at the beginning, rather than his wish list. So I will actually turn to the room very cheekily and just quickly ask if anybody in the room has a question, or if anyone has seen anything. I don't know, I think there's a couple of people watching the chat online, but are there any questions from the room just about the Article 6 governance frameworks? And or do any of the panelists have a question for each other about it? If there's not, then we can happily move to the break and move on to the second panel. I don't see any questions in the room. Anything? No? Okay, then I will just say thank you very, very much to our panelists. For me, it's a real privilege to get, buyers and sellers around the table to actually have the conversation about all the good bits and all the bad bits. Well, challenges that will be overcome, I'd like to see it as. On how we can rapidly move forward. And I think, yes, there may be some phone numbers and email addresses noted down around the place. So thank you very, very much. If you'd like to put your hands together for our panel. Thank you. And I'm so glad, Dr. Chibamba, that we got the internet working in the end. So thank you very, very much for joining us so early from Lusaka.
Thank you so much.